Let's make something beautiful today. Well, I missed you last week, and many of you know that we did not have a tutorial Tuesday last week because I was preparing for my very first craft fair, and bangles were the hot item of the day. I sold so many bangles in copper, in sterling silver. This very simple, believe it or not, all it is 10 gauge wire that's been hammered in the middle. I sold those right away. One of the bangles that I sold was a sterling silver bangle, and I'll put a picture of it here, that was 16 gauge wrapped around twice, and it gave that illusion that you were wearing more than one bracelet, and I wanted to expand on that. You could make this as many bands as you want, however you feel comfortable with having to get it into this clasp. So it looks like 4 bracelets, 4 very slender, delicate bangle bracelets, but it really is just one bracelet put together with this wonderful little clasp. I'll show you how to do all the elements, the wrapping, the clasp, and how you can make it that stacked look. So with one bracelet, it looks like you have 4 on. It really is a way to save time and save money when you just get one bracelet, but it looks like 4. I would also say that this is not absolute beginner. You got to have a few tutorials under your belt. And I would imagine if you've worked through a lot of my tutorials with success, you're probably going to be able to do this one as well. It's going to be some new elements in here, but it's just going to make you grow. It's just going to make you learn more and to be able to do more. So challenge yourself, and maybe you don't even want to do it. Stick around for the laughs. I always am, silly and goofy.
Ain't that the truth?
And we'll have bloopers at the end, which I'm sure there'll be a lot of bloopers today. So let's go over what you're gonna need. I basically have everything out. I've got bail pliers and flat nose and round nose and of course cutters. I've got some other kind of smaller chain nose, bent nose, and bench block. I've got both hammers. We're going to strengthen, we're going to texturize. I don't know if you notice, it has just slight little hammerings on it just to give it some reflection. The bangles are with 16 gauge. Believe it or not, the clasp is 18 gauge. This one here is 16 gauge on here, but this one is 18 gauge, and I think I kind of like it just slightly more delicate and refined. So we're gonna work with 18 gauge for that. And then the wrapping here that you see at the end that holds all these wires together is 20 gauge, half round, dead soft. This is my first time using half round. I wanna get some square, I wanna get all kinds of wire. So this is my first experimenting with this. So this was very fun. And of course, you're gonna need a ring mandrel. This one, in some ways I wish it was metal so I could get more texture with the hammering, but then I also like that it's wooden and stepped because that's how I come back, and I'm gonna show you how I get the bangles to sit level. All right, I think we're ready to go. Let's get started. So this is the formula that I use to figure out how much of the wire I'm supposed to be cutting. So I wanted a size 6 for 6 inches for my wrist, so I cut 6 inches because some of the length of the bracelet is going to be created with this clasp, and you can adjust, say like, oh man, I should have made this a little bigger, I need to make it smaller. You can adjust this gap with the hook that goes in here. So for this bangle, you're gonna need at least 3 of these wires cut to make our faux bangles. One of the center one will be bent back to hold the wraps in place. So at least 3 for this one. I was going to attempt doing 6 of them, but it was just too much to deal with. So I think 4 was a really happy medium. I'm gonna be creating a 7-inch bangle today, and I've cut 7 inches. Pretty straightforward and easy for you to figure out how many inches that you're gonna need. I'm pulling over my ring mandrel, and I wanna put this on the 7-inch, and we're just going to wrap it around until the ends come around to the back. And this is where all the hammering is coming in. I'm first going to go around with my nylon hammer And I'm just going to really tap all this down and strengthen it at the same time. You cannot hammer this enough. Switching over to my ball peen hammer, you don't have to do this, but it adds to that organic, can't mess it up look. So I'm going to go through and I'm just going to put some texturizing around this whole entire band. This is where I'd like to have a metal mandrel just to get a little more of that reflection, because this wood is kind of absorbing some of the impact and I'm not quite getting the texture that I really want, but you know, it is what it is. All right, I've gone through and put just very, very light texturizing around that. And you see how it's a kind of wonky and warped a little bit. I'm going to go back to the nylon hammer. And this is where that ridge comes in handy. I'm going to set it into that ridge. And then what I'm doing is I'm striking the hammer down in onto the bangle and down into that ridge, and it just really helps to level it out and kind of get any of those little minute bends out. If you do not have one of these stepped mandrels, you can work on it with your bench block as well to flatten out, and you know, with your chain nose pliers, even just with your hands. And so if it still needs a little help, put it on your bench block and hammer it flat. All right, I'm going to work through this last wire here and then we'll come back and put it all together. Okay, I've got my 4 bangles that are going to become one. I've got them ready, a little texturizing, they've been strengthened, they are ready to go. One thing I forgot to mention is that what we're using is masking tape. I'm going to use this to stabilize the bands together so I don't have to actively hold it. Okay, I'm realizing I don't have my ruler down here. And if it sounds different, it's because I'm in a totally different room in the house. My daughter is home, as you know. My husband is home because he's sick, and I'm doing all this hammering, and I came down in the basement. I didn't bring a ruler with me. All that to say that I want to place the tape 1.5 centimeters from the end of these wires. So I'm going to eyeball it, but I'm doing 1.5 centimeters. A 0.5 centimeter for the wraps, 1 centimeter for the 2 millimeter bail that I'm going to use to make loops. So that's the reason for the 1.5 centimeters. And I'm going to just place this in here. And this is going to help stabilize these so we don't have to, you know, really worry about them sliding all over the place. And I'm going to just give this a quick file just to make sure my ends are nice and smooth. All right, now we're going to move on to our wrappings, and I'm going to bring over my 20 gauge dead soft half round wire, and I'm just going to cut a length, maybe about 3 or 4 inches. Again, I don't have my ruler, so I just have a little length here to work with. This is about 3 or 4 inches, and I got to make sure I have it the right way. Okay, this is the half round side. And I'm just going to do, I think I did about 5 wraps. And this is up to you. This is a total design preference. If you want more, do more. It's only going to add to the structure of your piece. So have fun. This is where you're going to want to keep your pliers handy, your flat nose, your chain nose, and we're just going to compress these wraps. Other thing you want to keep in mind is keeping it nice and straight as you're bringing it across. Really pay attention to the angle of your wire as you're making these wraps. Every single wrap, do a little compression there to lock it into place. Paying attention to the angle, Make sure it's nice and perpendicular to the bangles themselves. And go slow. You know, I always say that. If this is your first time doing this, take your time. If this is your first time and it screws up, who cares? Do it again. I cannot tell you how many times I do things over and over and over again until I get it right. That's why I show you the bloopers at the end, because I want you to know that, you know, it's not always a success. But what really helps is taking your time and not rushing on ahead if you see any errors. It's much easier to fix things as you're going instead of later on. These tails, I'm going to make sure they're both finishing underneath. Grabbing my flush cutters, I'm just going to trim these off. Just push that down. These little banded wraps, they're not as easy as they look because if you don't get that wire laying correctly, you're like, what was she trying to do there? So take your time and don't get upset if it's not laying correctly. The more you do it, the more you get familiar with how the wire wants to wrap and how it's working, and just taking your time to make sure your angles are correct, you're going to be successful. So don't worry if it doesn't work the first time. Okay, so now I'm going to go either with chain nose. I like these flat nose pliers for this. I'm just going to grab all of those wraps, and I think I have too much wire on the end because that's what happens when you eyeball things and I don't have my ruler. You understand life, right? When we have to just make adjustments. I'm going to grab another pair of chain nose pliers. I'm going to bend to a 90-degree angle the outer wires. Okay, at this point you've got your wires looking like this. These two outer ones bent backwards. These two middle ones are going to be wrapped inwards, and they're going to lay over top these wraps and kind of lock in. Can't see it. Lock in those wraps. Just helps hold them down. And I'm supporting these bangles with my left hand as I bend these backwards. You know what? I think I'm just going to do one at a time. It's just a better result if you just go one at a time and you go nice and slowly. Yay. And then once you get them to that point, make sure this tape is out of the way. Then you can just press them down. I'm going to use my handy dandy bail pliers to help squeeze those down against those wraps. You know I love my bail pliers, and I love them for more than just making loops. This is a great box joint for really clamping down on things nice and securely, because you're not just from side to side, these two side walls, you've got this bottom piece as well, and it really helps to lock things in. So I am happy with that. Before I go and make these loops, I just want to straighten this out. Any kind of wonkiness that you see in your wire before you make loops, you're going to see it in the loop. So take time to perfect your wires before you start making loops and shapes and things like that, because it will show up. Bail pliers, 2mm on my pliers. As I mentioned before, I said we were doing 1.5 centimeters, a 1/2 centimeter for these wraps, And the centimeter works so wonderfully with the 2mm bail for a perfect, it just wraps around, it meets, and it's like they were made for each other. So I've got my pliers right on the end of this wire, possibly. 16 gauge wants to slip out, so I'm supporting very firmly with my left hand and going slowly as I bring this around to kind of a C. It's not fully closed, and you'll see the reason why it's not fully closed just yet. I'm going to flip this around and do the same thing on the other side until I've got these two little hooks sitting there. All right, we've got one side down. Let's come around to the other side. Just file this down a little bit, make sure it's nice and smooth. I'm not liking how the end of these are just kind of going all over the place, so I've got them back on our bracelet mandrel, and I'm going to, with the nylon hammer, hammer these down again. Just kind of going all which way, and I don't want that. I'm telling you, you cannot hammer it enough. And let me trim that. Grabbing another little piece of tape, and I'm sorry, I have to eyeball this again. Remember, we're going for 1.5 centimeters, leaving room for the wraps and leaving room to make the loops. I've got my tape set up and I'm ready to do the wraps. Again, with the 20 gauge half round. I'm pretty sure this is the half round side. And we're going to put in those matching wraps, remembering to go slow and watch the angle of the wire, keeping it perpendicular to the bangles, and keeping your chain nose or your flat nose handy to lock down each one of our wraps. I'm holding all of this in here very tightly as well, kind of holding this end and the bangles at the same time. Laying that down nice and perpendicular. Lock it in, watching that angle, and wrap that around. One, two, three, four, five. So now we can wrap our tails to the back side. And give a little pinch down. If at this point you think this amount of wire in the end is either too much or too little, you still have a little play in these wraps. They can be gently slid back and forth, just a tiny bit to adjust this length of this wire here. If you need more, you need less, whatever, because it is going to want to slide a little bit. So just be aware of that. I am happy with that. So let's turn around and trim these ends. Okay, with our flat nose pliers, I really like the flat nose for this because it can cover all of those wraps. And we're going to bend back the outer wires to a 90-degree angle. I'm going to take just a moment to fix them. Make sure they're nice and flat. No wonkiness in there. And then holding all of this in here really firmly so we don't bend up our bangles. At one at a time, I'm going to bend these back to cover those wraps. I think because I told you to have my ruler so I'm not measuring, I have a little too much. So I'm just going to trim this, making sure it's still flush. And then I'm going to press it down with that box joint in my bail pliers. Make sure they're nice and straight and they're sitting next to each other properly. Those are looking really nice. All right, we're gonna put those matching, they're gonna be hooks for now, 2 millimeter on our bail pliers, and we're gonna roll inwards, right from the end of this 1 centimeter that we left. And remember, we're not doing the full loop. We're just gonna put a hook, kind of just that little C shape. And you see how nice and slow I go? I cannot stress that enough. To go slowly and take your time. I promise the result will be so much better. All right, so now we're going to do the clasp. And as I mentioned before, this one is with 16 gauge. You can do this with 16 gauge if you would like. I'm gonna do 18 gauge as this one is just slightly daintier, but it still has structure to it. It's hard to tell, but I just like the 18 gauge. I didn't think it was gonna hold as well, but it actually is quite, it's perfect, really. For the eye of the clasp, we need 2 inches of 18 gauge. And for the hook part, 3 inches of 18 gauge. I'm gonna start with the 2 inch. Back with my bail pliers, I'm gonna use the 7 millimeter bail to create this, the insertion part. I'm gonna find the center. The center on this is quite important, but you don't need to get your ruler out and measure to do that. The way you can tell if you have the middle of your wire is if the ends come around and are even. That is your test to see if you've got it in the middle. If they meet perfectly, you've got your pliers in the middle perfectly. I'm going to take that off and I'm going to move over using the 2 millimeter bail, which means I need to put the 3 in the middle so I can roll these back. Give you another look at that. We're going to put these little loops on the outside. And you just, it's a simple holding this firmly and just rolling back. I'm going to turn it over and do the exact same thing. You've got that little eye part of the clasp. Hold on to that, grab your 3 inches of 18 gauge. Okay, so last week, well 2 weeks ago in the bar link tutorial, I was showing you a way how I made the loops on the end of the wire to make that bar link to connect, and it really wasn't the best way.
I have admitted that.
And so we're going to learn a great way to make loops that kind of make that keyhole loop, and then the wires come out parallel next to each other. And my friend Kelly at Hand Forged Finery also was like, you know, a better way to do that would be like this. So I'm back with our bail pliers, 2 millimeters in the center of our wire. And we're going to bend around making the horseshoe shape and seeing if our wires meet. Now, what do you do if one is longer? The longer one, you're going to keep on pushing over more. That is using up more of the wire, hence making it shorter. If one side is shorter, you're going to pull it out and use less of this wire here, hence making it longer.
And so on and so forth.
So that's how you fix that. It's a super easy fix. You don't need to trim any wire. That's what I used to do until I realized you know, we're all learning. That was like a year ago, and then I finally learned that. Okay, so once you've got it like this, swing this bail around to the side and take all of that and bend that against it like this. And you're like, oh my gosh, Carrie, you just wrecked that. Hold on a second. Now swing that other bail around to the other side. Take all that which you just made and swing it back down around it. And just keep adjusting until you get it, that loop centered and your wires are parallel. That was an amazing trick. I thank you, Kelly, for inspiring me to find a different way to make these little keyhole loops on the end. So go back to that bar link tutorial from 2 weeks ago and use this technique instead. I'm telling you what, it was fantastic. And I love this community of jewelry makers because we're so willing to share information. We don't want to gatekeep things. We want to make beautiful things, and we want to help others make beautiful things and beautiful things of our lives. So I love this community of wonky wire workers. So we've got this. The same thing we did here on the end. We're going to get our bail pliers and we're going to put little loops that roll outwards with the 2mm bail. I like to flip over so I can just work the same way. If you've got anything that needs fixing, this is the time to do it. Anything that is not perfectly straight, or you need to adjust your loops. So now we have our base, we have our frame, and we can put this clasp on. We're going to take either one and put it on our hooks. Now you see that like the distance is not matching up. That is not a problem. Either squeeze in your clasp so that the hooks, the hoops are closer together, or you can take the hooks and bend them outwards. It depends on what kind of look you're going for. You just slide that on. I mean, it is so fantastic. You're going to have movement. This is going to have swing in there. I'm going to hold this in here firmly as I just bring this closed. I kind of do increments, you know, little by little on either side so that they're matching. Because you don't want one tighter than the other because it will pull the clasp either way. So we want to make sure that these loops are even. You see how it's a nice little movement in there. Really, really nice. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. I do need to make a little adjustment. Either bring these loops in. It works a lot like when you make jump rings and you're trying to bring in that gap a little more. You just bring it past the point of meeting and they will sit closer together. I switched over to some flat nose for a little more control. Something I want to show you that I did and I didn't realize it was doing. Do you see how that these loops are sitting, like they're still sitting way back like that? I'm going to bend these down to match this one. It needs to be more in line with the shape of the bangle. For whatever reason, I just didn't keep cranking it around. So make sure that your loops here are not sitting back like this. We want to keep them in the flow, in the shape of the bangle. Just use my flat nose pliers to little by little redirect these loops so that they're more in line with the shape of the bangle. So now that we have our attachments on here, we're going to determine where this bend is going to go in this hook. And I can see that it is sitting very nicely right over that eye. And I'm going to slide in my 2mm bail right around kind of where it crosses over that loop of the eye. And then I'm just going to do a simple bend around the bail. And it's going to form that hook. That will just slide in there so nicely and hold that together. And there's still a little play in there as well. So it's not super tight and there's not tension on the bangles themselves. Now it is time to remove this tape. And there we have this bracelet that looks like 4 bangles together stacked, but it really is only one bracelet. And you could go in and pull these apart and kind of give it that airiness in there if you would like, or just leave it nice and stacked tight. 4 bracelets in one, I like that idea. I'm thinking about doing another show in December, so I'm definitely gonna have these ready to go for that because they were a popular item in this last weekend's craft fair. So bangles, I don't know, bangles are always in style, aren't they? Just a reminder that this is a little more than beginner, but I think it's going to grow your skills. And if, like I said before, if you've done many of my tutorials, you're gonna be ready to do this. As long as you go slow, take your time, fix your errors as you go, you're gonna end up with a great end product. Well, I was ready to be back with you. I really did miss you wonderful wonky wire workers last week. I feel like I'm back to coming home. I really felt like that. I'm like, oh, it'll be so nice to not run the roads and do all this craziness and just come back and make something beautiful with a friend. So I'm hoping you got something out of it. You enjoyed this project and maybe you're gonna sell it at your craft shows or give it for gifts this coming Christmas. Take it, use it, be blessed. And if you like making jewelry with a friend, please subscribe, leave your comments, and tell me what you liked about this video. Oh, I want to show you one more thing before we go. Yesterday, in the midst of making bangles, I also made some silver clay earrings. I went out into my garden, I harvested the last little bit of yarrow before winter sets in, and I impressed the yarrow leaf, very sweet, onto some silver clay and added, what was this? This was aquamarine and fluorite faceted rondelles to the bottom and made some ear wires to go with it. Really, really fun. I am in love with silver clay. So I'll be showing you some more things. And again, if you like this content, you like hanging out with a friend, I would love for you to subscribe and join me every week for Tutorial Tuesday where we make something beautiful. Stupid. Oh my gosh. I don't know what that word is. Gosh, what am I saying? I don't know. That's so wordy and stupid. What am I saying? I don't know what that was. I really don't know what in the world I'm saying. Dang, I don't have a ruler down here. What am I saying? Oh, precious. Wow, you piece of junk. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Come on, yo.